You are live. All right, so let's get this started. So, hey, folks, and welcome again to iWizard. We have a special episode for you today. We have a special guest with us this evening. It is my pleasure to welcome, and this is actually my first time meeting him in person. Well, not in person, semi in person. This is Josh from Red Fury Books. Welcome on the channel, man.
Thank you, Jordan. It's good to be here. Yeah, I'm
Yeah, thanks
really
for
happy
doing
to
this.
talk with you. I know we have a lot of reading interests in common, and I think also our jobs are pretty much in common too. So just looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you say that because I was going to rope you into a conversation about being an educator and all that. But I had Alan on the channel from Library of Alexandria about a year ago, and it was a fun conversation, really great. But we ended up talking about education for like 2/3 of the stream. And at a certain point, Alan was just like, so did you want to at some point talk about books? And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I kind of like lost myself, but yeah, I
Stay on
appreciate
brand,
you doing
yeah.
this. Yeah. So actually, I think I first heard of your channel, Josh, when you started a Discord with Joanna and Matt. I know Joanna pretty well. I don't know Matt that well. And it took me a while to finally get to watching your videos because there's just only so much time and you're trying to read and trying to watch other people's videos. And I'd seen you, I think, a couple of times pop up in the comment sections of my live streams. And so a couple of them. And so anyways, long story short, I've been listening to a lot of your videos recently. I say listening because it's usually in the car, so I often can't comment. But I'll tell you, I really like your style of presentation, super chill. I like that you're showcasing your reading life and building community, doing book club discussions and read-alongs. So anyways, I'll start with this. Josh, how did you get into this? I know we talked about you're an educator like me. I think you're a music teacher,
Yeah.
you said. How did you start doing this weird thing that we do in public? Like, what made you decide to become a booktuber?
So actually, it kind of has to do with me being a musician, and it was kind of during the pandemic. I didn't have that creative outlet, being able to make music with others. And I was finding that I had that void in my life. And that was actually when I discovered BookTube as a viewer and just started watching a bunch of channels. And like a lot of us, I think I thought about it for about 6 months before I actually, decided to like make my first video. And like most of us, my first few videos were just so cringeworthy. But yeah, it was really just to fill that creative void in my life. I wasn't able to make music. I was teaching online, like online music is like the absolute worst subject to ever try to teach online when you're used to like stepping in front of an orchestra. So yeah, that's really how it started. And to be honest, if you would have told me back then, I'd still be doing it like 5 years later or however long my channel's been out, I would have thought you're crazy, because I really thought I was going to do that for a few months until life got back to normal. And then I could look back and say, hey, I did something tangible during the pandemic. I made a few videos and it was kind of fun, but I just kept doing it. And part of it was like the interaction, like meeting people like you that are all over the world, and, meeting people that are just into books and reading the same kind of books. And yeah, I just kept at it and I still enjoy it. So, I'll keep doing it as long as I enjoy it.
Yeah, my story's similar to yours. I had all this extra time during the pandemic. Teaching online was giving me all this extra time with not having to commute and not having extra duties or school things that I needed to do. And back then I was doing like a once a month podcast about the classics. And during the pandemic, I was using my free time to I was doing what you were trying to do is stay productive. I was writing op-eds at various outlets, but I was kind of getting bored of that. And I was reading more and more fantasy and sci-fi. And I started watching BookTube more often too. And I knew about like Daniel Green and Murphy Napier and Elliot Brooks and some of those early like booktubers, Kitty G. But I kind of assumed that was just some idiosyncratic thing that like a couple of people did. I don't know about you, Josh, but I don't even think I knew the word booktube. It wasn't in my lexicon, but it was actually watching Mike from Mike's Book Reviews, who I know is a shared friend, that did it for me. He was just having so much fun sharing his love for books, making videos. and he was kind of feeling like a newbie about it too. And I said to myself, I don't think I definitely couldn't do what Mike does, which is turn on the camera like 4 times a week and just ramble, and then what comes out is like gold and like really fun, and like, you know, he's just so good at like off the cuff. He's great at what he does. I'm like, but I definitely couldn't do that, but I could do my own thing, which is I take a little more of a scholarly bent, and I can do deep dives on some of these books. And like you said, my early videos are so cringy. I think I did like my first review was of like a sci-fi novel by Jack Campbell, just this little short, breezy, fun book. And I made like a 36-minute review. And it's just like, I didn't even understand at the time that people just, you don't need that long of a review for such a sort of beach ready kind of fun like sci-fi book. But so that's kind of my story. So we kind of have a similar story there.
Yeah, and you know, Mike's channel was the first channel I found. And part of it was one of the things I did during the pandemic. I'd had a friend that for at least 10 years had been just getting on me. You got to read the Wheel of Time. You've got to read the Wheel of Time. Well, I finally had time to, and no excuse to read the Wheel of Time. So I picked up the Wheel of Time. And when I was reading it, at some point, I guess, you know, our computers listen to us. And I just hopped on YouTube, and there was a video of this guy, Mike, talking about Eye of the World. I'm like, hey, I just read this. So, yeah, I actually discovered him before Daniel and Murphy and all of these other people. But yeah, and I think Mike's inspired a lot of us because he's, you know, he's just a regular guy like us that just kind of turns the camera on and gives you kind of the everyman perspective. And and I think a lot of us saw ourselves a little bit in him, and were able to you know, turn that into our own channels, I guess.
Yeah, precisely. Like, you know, he calls himself just another guy with Wi-Fi, and he revels in the fact that he's an everyman, and he is. And I'm glad he takes pride in that. And it's funny, speaking of that, one of the reasons I got into BookTube as well is that I have a normal life. I'm like a normal person. I go to work every day, and I go to, you know, 4th of July picnics, and I do things with friends. I go to the bar with friends, and you know, I'm having a kid soon. And it's funny because wherever I go, a lot of my friends don't read, or at least don't read the same kind of books that I do. So I'll go to my wife's cousin's house for like a barbecue or something like that, or a birthday party, and I have nothing to talk about with the other guys there, or anyone there really. And we have this kind of niche interest that we all share. And so part of it was wanting to feel like a sense of belonging, like not feeling so alienated, feeling like I had a community. I don't know if that was part of what it was for you as well.
A little bit. So I was lucky when I live in Austin now. I've lived in Austin 8 years, but I used to live in Dallas. And when I lived in Dallas, I was part of a book club. It was a bunch of guys that I think most of them wanted to have an excuse for once a month to get away from their wives. And we had a book club, and it was a lot of fun. We would get together and we'd have dinners and drinks kind of based on whatever the book was, which was really, really, really cool. Then I moved here. I didn't have that outlet anymore. But you could kind of find it online because I do have friends here that are readers, but not as big a readers, and don't often read the same things. And it's so cool. Like when you put out a review about a book that you think nobody's read, and then all of a sudden you meet all these people that have read the book before, and you have conversations about it. It's just, it's so exciting to be able to just find, you know, this community of like-minded people from all over the world. I mean, our Discord, we have a huge contingent in Australia. We have a huge contingent in Europe. And it's just, it's really cool to just talk with people that just, we have such shared interests. And it's so great that we're able to connect in this way.
Absolutely. Now, I get the sense that you were a big reader before you even started a channel. I'm interested in that because I was too, but I was into different kinds of books. So I was more into the classics, you know, romantic poetry and German philosophy and Buddhist philosophy and all this other stuff. I was just reading suburban American fiction, gritty realism, all this stuff, existentialism, all this stuff. And it was my wife actually that turned me on to fantasy and sci-fi. And so it really was kind of like maybe a year and a half before I started the channel that I started getting into sci-fi. So I couldn't start a channel and make my top 100 favorite,
Yeah.
speculative fiction books, because I was just learning. So I think
Yeah.
one quality of my channel is it's this guy who doesn't know as much about fantasy and sci-fi as everyone else. And I really don't. So I sometimes watch Mike because Mike's like, okay, I'm going to review all of the Wheel of Time books. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that would take me 3 years. And so what I do is I'm coming at these books fresh for the first time. And I have this background in philosophy and English and teaching and stuff like that. So I'm applying that to the books. But I get the sense that you are a really big, I've seen your bookshelf. It is gargantuan. It is filled with these beautiful leather bound hardcover. It's just that's a beautiful, beautiful library. It's just, I'm very jealous. It's lovely. But now you started reading really early. And I heard in one of your videos that you took a hiatus on fantasy and sci-fi and kind of stopped reading that. What's your story kind of leading up to you starting a channel?
Yeah, so my reading's always gone through kind of phases. I read when I was very young, and then once I discovered fantasy, like sixth grade, I think, that was kind of the dominant genre that I read, like middle school, high school. Then you go to college, and you're only reading for college. Except for summers, and it seemed like summers all I was reading was Stephen King. After college, when I got back into reading again, I didn't really gravitate to fantasy and sci-fi anymore. I was reading actually a lot of the things you were talking about. I was reading about, philosophy, especially like, man's place in the universe, leaning towards texts like that. And I also discovered just other genres. I got into biographies for a while. I really got into crime fiction for a long time and got into that. And then really the fantasy took a back seat for like 16 or 18 years, where the only new fantasy I read for about that period of time were the Harry Potter books and the Song of Ice and Fire books. And only because those were, I guess, more common in the zeitgeist. And I felt like I needed to read those. And then before I got back into, like I mentioned, Wheel of Time, that was before I started my channel. And that kind of is what got me back in, was discovering Fantasy Booktube and just learning all these authors that I missed. And I started reading those again. And, for a while, it's still my favorite genre. And it's been fun catching up because of that big break. All these great authors that I love. I mean, Hobb, Kay, Abercrombie, all these authors that I'd never read before, I got to discover and devour in a short period of time. So, it's kind of fun to go back. But I mean, I do cycle through the things that I love and the things that I want to read most, and it's kind of an ebb and flow. And it's just fantasies at the top for a while right now.
Gotcha. And you mentioned at one point that you like crime fiction. One of the things I really have really developed a fondness for about your channel is that you're not afraid to read and review these thriller novels, which I love thriller novels. And when I started the channel, I was like, oh, no one wants to hear about a thriller novel. Those are just airport books, right? You tear through them on your flight to Florida or whatever, and you don't make videos about them. What's there to analyze, right? It's just fun. It's just sort of like, fun, sort of guilty pleasure, lowbrow entertainment. And yet I actually think that I was wrong about that. And I thought, I love like John Grisham and like legal thrillers and stuff like that. So why don't I do a review of John Grisham? It totally flopped. It was like, and I had fewer subscribers back then, but it was like 80 views, and it got up to like 120, and then it stood frozen there for like months. And I'm like, okay, so there it is. No one cares about thrillers. Now, of course, that would be committing anecdotal fallacy. The fact that one didn't succeed doesn't mean that I shouldn't be reviewing thrillers. But what's funny is that in the last like year, people have started watching. I did a review of The Firm and stuff like that, and people started watching that, and now it's up probably close to 1,000 or something like that. I forget what it is, but I think there might be kind of a renaissance or a revival of people being interested in thrillers, and I feel like Booktube is finally like going All right, maybe, and you do that on your channel. I love that. You talk about who some of the ones that you like, Michael Connolly and Don Winslow, and
Yeah.
I love that you do that. And so tell me about that a little bit. You're into these thrillers. Are you getting much of a reception on BookTube with those?
So yes and no. I mean, I think any individual book review, it pretty much bombs at first. Nobody watches it unless they really want to read the book, or they've read the book and they want to hear you talk about it. But those usually do gain strength over time. So those, it's one of those, anytime I do one of those, I'm like, okay, that analytics thing on YouTube, it's going to be 10 out of 10. I've no doubt it's going to be like my lowest performing thing.
Well, it's like evergreen content, I'll say. So
Yeah.
I've noticed that too, is that you make a book review and of course it bombs at first, but conversely, when you make like a weekly update or a monthly update, that's not evergreen content. No one's going to care about your Mike's 50-second weekly update, a year from now. No one's going to watch that. It's going to stay flat. The book review, the full review of a book will do really poorly at first, but over time, when someone's interested in reading that, they're going to search. I do the same thing. I search on YouTube and Google, what do people think about this? So.
Yeah. But as for thrillers with me, I read a lot of genres every month. We're about to finish June this month because I was off. This is like a huge month. I finished 14 books this month, 7 different genres. And for me, like when I hear people talk about reading slumps, like I don't know what those are because I've never been in one.
That was the next question I was going to ask you. I heard you talk about. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've never been in a reading slump, and I think one of the reasons is because I'm so often switching genres, and different genres do different things. For instance, if I go from epic fantasy, epic fantasy, it's like big, thick books, huge cast of characters, world building, history, lore, all this stuff that you have to think about. And then I pick up a crime thriller, and it's like a third of the size, and it's a plot-based story.
Yeah.
And it gives me just a totally different mental stimulus so that I don't get burned out. I think people that get into reading slumps, it's because they're often reading so much of the same, and it wears you out after a while. But for me, I've never been in one because I tend to jump around genres so often. And I make it a point when I sketch out my TBR, which I usually do that quarterly, I make a point to have at least 3 genres every month as kind of the goal for each month, but it often ends up, this month was 7. Some months it's going to be more, but it's at least going to be 3. And for me, it just keeps it fresh. And, the last thing we want reading to be is something that's stressful or not enjoyable. It's something that we enjoy to do.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I see content creators as well that get burned out. And part of it, I think, is because they're trying to, they have the FOMO and they're trying to catch up on every single series that everybody's talking about. And it becomes too much for your brain to handle, I think, especially in the fantasy realm. Reading one 900-page book after another. It can be tough for even the best of readers and the biggest of fantasy fans.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had an interesting experience joining BookTube. When you enter this world, you hear all these new terms that like ordinary people don't even use or think about. The best example I can think of, and this is kind of a confession, you'll be shocked by this, I think, because we majored in different things probably and teach different subjects and stuff like that. But when I was an undergrad, I majored in philosophy and English. And I've said before, my entire experience as in college, even through grad school, and probably into my first 6 years of teaching, I had not heard the term spoiler or non-spoiler. It's just like when you're reading Shakespeare, when you're an English major reading Charles Dickens or John Updike or Toni Morrison or Cormac McCarthy, or you're studying philosophy and you're reading Plato's Republic, not a single person ever said during that time, no, please don't spoil book 8 of Plato's Republic for me. I'm not there yet. When he talks about the education of the citizens, don't spoil it. It's just not something I'd ever heard before. And so now I'm in the BookTube world, and I do get it. Don't get me wrong. I get why, especially in genre fiction where it's so plot forward. I get why people are really vigilant about no spoilers, and I love genre fiction now. But anyways, yeah, I was going to ask you about that reading slump thing. And I really think that's cool about your channel. And I think you're right. The reason you don't get into reading slumps is because you have such a taste that is very diverse. And I get the sense that if you have to break your schedule, I noticed that when you do your TBRs, like what you're going to read for the next month, you'll say, and I'd never heard anyone do this before, you'll say, not here's exactly what I'm going to read, and I'm not going to break from that schedule no matter what, gun to my head. You actually say, I have a high probability of reading this one. I have a lower probability of reading this one, might get bumped. I love that nuance. And yeah, I totally agree with you. For me, I've never had a reading slump, Josh, because I just try to read books I'm confident I'm going to like, and I have a cutoff point. So if I get a third of the way through the book and I'm still not enjoying it, or I'm bored, or I feel like it's not going anywhere, I just put it down and move on to the next one. And the thing is, not liking a book can be, in some sense, an important sort of bucket list experience. I mean, there are just so many books out there that I really want to read. And when I finally get there and I end up really not liking it, at least I know, right? It's like, you know, if you've always wanted to go to London or something like that, and you actually go and you don't really have fun, maybe you don't like the food, or you had a bad experience with the people, or maybe it wasn't all you thought it was cracked up to be, then at the end you get to say, I went to London, I checked that off my bucket list, been there, done that, but it wasn't for me. And it's clarifying, and you learn more about yourself. It doesn't mean London's bad. It could just mean you didn't mesh with it and it didn't mesh with you. I feel the same way about books. And so, and I'm a mood reader too. So I read what I feel like reading at any given moment, when I feel like reading it. And I feel like that's like a really natural way to read stuff versus the FOMO thing. I don't know how you feel about that network of observations there.
Yeah, I think, well, when I do my TBRs and I give a bunch of books that I'm confident that I'll read, because I do sketch out a schedule, but I don't hold myself to it. But I also don't schedule as many books that I think I'll read. For instance, in June, I knew I'd read probably 10 books. I read 14, but I only put on the schedule 5 books so that after those 5, I could 100% just embrace what I wanted to read most. You know, and the other thing with DNFs, I've embraced the not right now idea that, you know, nothing is truly a DNF, that maybe I'll want to read it, try it another time. Cause I've heard so many people that would DNF a book and then come back to it at a different stage of their life, or just time where they're not as busy, or they're more interested in it and love it. So, you know, I don't always look at a DNF as an ending. Like, I'll never visit this again. I think of it, well, maybe I'll hit that one again when it's calling to me. You know, like you said, when a certain book is calling to me, or a certain genre is calling to me, that's when you want to pick it up. But yeah, I think it's tough when people feel like they're obligated to read certain things, to be part of the conversation or whatever. You know, I think that could be a recipe for disaster and a recipe for not enjoying a lot of things that you might be reading.
Yeah, absolutely. And inspiration, don't get me wrong, is a good thing. And, you know, people turning you on to certain genres and books is a good thing. But if you're developing that kind of that herd mentality and you're not really following your nose in terms of what you're really passionate about, yeah, I do think that can be a problem. Hey, speaking of then, I find myself wondering, is there a book for you that is like that? Like, let's do both senses. Are there books that you really thought that you were going to like, or that you really wanted to like, but that just, I don't know, didn't live up to the hype? And then vice versa. Are there any books that you didn't expect to be the kind of book that you'd like, but then you ended up loving it? What do you think about that?
That's tougher, at least for recent history, because I've gotten to the point where I understand my tastes for the most part.
Yeah. And
I generally have an idea. Like, for instance, if I see someone recommend a book, I don't just take it as the recommendation. I always see what they're talking about. For instance, like something that I knew, well, this is kind of not the question you asked, but I knew I was going to love Rob and Hobb. after seeing 3 or 4 people talk about just her writing and her characterization,
right,
just everything about it. I just knew that I was going
right.
to love it. I guess probably one of the big ones that, I don't know if it's a big one, is I didn't love the Mark Lawrence's first trilogy, and I thought I was going to really love that one. I liked it. I thought the second book was real strong, but I thought the outer books weren't that great. So that one kind of surprised me a little bit, but it was one of those where what I thought about him going in proved correct. I really liked the writing, just didn't really love the story. So I'll probably love, future works of his a little bit more. Let me think of one that I didn't think that surprised me. That's a tougher one.
Think about it, and I'll share one. I've got one that applies to the first example that you gave. I'm like that too, Josh. I know if I'm going to like it. So people, if they call me like a 5-star strumpet, I think is the term that Alan uses. It's usually because I'm picking books in advance that I'm 90% sure I'm going to love, and so that would be the reason. So it's a non-representative sample in terms of the grade that it gets. For me, one that I was thinking of was Ender's Game, and that kind of evades the thing that you were talking about. From everything that everyone said about Ender's Game, I swore I was going to love it. I said, this is right up my alley. This is going to be one of my favorites. It was one I was really excited to read. I thought I'd like it. It was one that I wanted to like. And this will get me in trouble saying I don't like Ender's Game. I didn't hate it, guys, so no one get mad at me, but it was probably a 6 out of 10 for me. I just had mixed feelings. It's got a good plot. It's got some really innovative ideas for the time period it was written in. Some of the things Card does in that book are like tropes now of young adult fiction at this point that he kind of started. And I know this book is very influential for kids who grew up in the 80s and 90s like I did. So there are some good things. I like the way he does Battle School and puts the kids through these tests and games and simulation. And I like some of the plot twists. But I found myself not liking the prose. It felt to me garbled and unclear at times. I found that a lot of what happens in the story is just ludicrously far-fetched. I won't go any further. I'm going to just make people so mad. And I guess this is sounding like a hot take. I didn't mean to sound like a hot take. But are there books that you I don't know, maybe you got roped into them because you were part of a book club or you were doing a read along and you didn't think you'd love it. And then it turned out, wow, like I really enjoyed that. Wow.
Yeah, that's usually, at this point, it's a book will really surprise me if I love it and I didn't think I would love it. I think the opposite happens a bit more for me, just by the way that I choose books. But yeah, no, I've heard, I personally love Ender's Game, but I do know a lot of people that don't like it at all. So, there's a lot of us that love it, but you're not.
Right. You were probably part of the audience I was upsetting with that. I was finding myself ranting. Yeah. So if you guys like Ender's Game, you are welcome here. I apologize for that. For me, the vice versa sort of thing would be Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. My wife hated that book in high school. She had to read it. And she told me, like, this book is terrible. And even before I had to teach, so at this school where I'm at now, I have to teach that some years. It depends what grade I teach. But so the first time I had to teach that, I had my wife's negative comments echoing in my reverberating in my mind. She absolutely hated it. Sometimes it's the way it's taught, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And then I went to teach it. And so I read it over the summer to be ready for the fall. And I just loved it. I was blown away by how good it was. And I said, this is just one of the best things I've ever read. I loved it. And she still doesn't understand how I could like that. But so
we're all different.
I know. There's no accounting for taste. Again, back to the fact that you have this diverse reading taste in terms of going between different genres and having just varied interests. I love watching I love that you do these micro book reviews and you review a bunch of books. And so I'd love to, you have varied interests. I'd love to go through some of those genres that you love, starting with fantasy. I wanted to ask you, Josh, why do you think that you read fantasy? It's an odd genre. There's a lot of people that I talk to, and I bring up the fact that I love fantasy literature, and they go, fantasy literature. What are you, a child? And I have to say, well, I'm a child at heart sometimes, but
There
no,
we
that's not
go.
why. So why do you read fantasy, and who are some of your favorite fantasy authors? I know you already said Robin Hobb. Why don't you take me through, why do you think you gravitate towards this genre, and who are some of the big names, big authors for you?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it, I think, is the escapism. It is so different. No, even if you're reading low fantasy, that's a form of escapism. And I think most of my reading, I mean, even crime fiction, that's a fun kind of escapism because I don't live in a world with criminals. So,
Right.
that's even a
Right.
kind of escapism. And I think that's a big part of it is just, ever since I first read fantasy for the first time in 6th grade, it's just something that just gets my imagination, just gets those juices flowing. And, I think that's the reason that I gravitated back to it, and I still love it. I still love the feeling of wonder when you get that new world, that something is incredible in it that you really enjoy. And I just love the inventiveness and how diverse it is as well. As for some of my favorites, Robin Hobb, Realm of the Elderlings, that's my favorite fantasy series. Guy Gabriel Kay may be my favorite author. I just finished reading all of his works a couple months ago. He's ridiculously amazing. And of course, Tolkien is still up there. I'm even reading the other things of Tolkien that Christopher Tolkien put together. I'm slowly making my way through the history of Middle Earth. So I've read, in addition to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, the Three Great Tales, I'm doing the history of Middle Earth. I'm going through all of that too. Because one of the things I do love about fantasy is the world building. And that's one of the things is I appreciate, just the depth of the worlds that Tolkien created. And I think like anything, it's always good to go back to one of the sources of a genre that you enjoy so much. So those would probably be my top three, Kay, Hobb, Tolkien, and then probably I'd say Abercrombie's probably up there too, just to fill out a Mount Rushmore of fantasy authors for me.
Yeah, that was well said. And I have long wanted to read Robin Hobb. I don't know why it is, but the first time I got really interested in reading her, there was it was a dual kind of two-person interview with George R. R. Martin and Robin Hobb. They're sitting on stage in these thrones, and the audience was asking them each questions about their writing. And she just sounded so smart. And I said, I have to read her books. I don't know when I'm going to get to them, but because people like Samwise, who I see is watching, keep challenging me to read things like Pillars of the Earth for August and Kristen Lavransdatter for September, which is like 1,000 pages. My gosh. So like
Pillars is amazing though.
I need to get to the Robin Hobb. So
no, Hobb's great. Pillars of the Earth is a really fast 1,000-page read though.
Okay.
That's one of my favorite books of all time. It's incredible. So he's doing God's work making you read Pillars. But yeah, the good thing with Hobb though is Realm of the Elderlings is 16 books, but you don't need to read it consecutively. You can read like the first trilogy and take a break, and then read the second trilogy when you have time and take a break. And that's actually how I did it. I spread it out over, I don't know, 18 months to 2 years, and really enjoyed it that way. So yeah, you don't have to read all of it at once.
Okay, so please elaborate on Robin Hobb. I'm sure you'd be glad to. I'm a total newbie when it comes to Robin Hobb. I've read none of her work, so this is a giant gap in my fantasy literature education. I am very much interested, and so first of all, why should I read Robin Hobb? And second of all, where do I start? And it sounds like you would recommend Realm of the Elderlings. Again, yeah. I know nothing about this. People have made reviews of Hobbs's work, like Mike. I've skipped them because I have no reference point. I know nothing about her works except that I heard an interview with her once, and all the people I respect in Booktube think she's the bee's knees. So what say you? Where should I start? Why should I read Robin Hobb?
So Hobb is, in my opinion, the greatest character writer in fantasy. Full stop. Um, she is also one of the best prose writer in fantasy, and that's something that I value. The people that enjoy Hobb the most are the ones that are willing to be patient because her plots move slowly. But she also, as the plot moves slowly, you get incredible characterization, you get incredible world building, and you get just an incredible reading experience. Her Realm of the Elderlings is 5 different series that are separate. And you can actually start at there's 2 different places you can start, but there's really one best places to start, I think, is Assassin's Apprentice. But the first, third, and fifth series follows a single character named Fitz, where he's 6 years old at the very beginning. So it's kind of coming of age in the first trilogy. And then the third trilogy, he's back as the main character, and he's a man in his 30s. And then in the last trilogy, he's a man in his 60s. And it's kind of his story, and it's a first-person narrative for those 3 trilogies. And it's one of those, like, you get to know this character so well. He's so human. He can be a total idiot at times, but as Hobb fans like to say, yeah, Fitz is an idiot, but he's our idiot. It has some incredible magic. There's kind of 2 kinds of magic in this world that are really interesting. There's great, there's great political intrigue in some of the books. The connections between characters is incredible. She's just, I said that's my favorite book series. Tolkien has been my favorite book series, Lord of the Rings, since I was 14 years old. And I thought that would never be topped until I finished Realm of the Elderlings, and Robin Hobb did it. So Assassin's Apprentice, Farseer trilogy is the best place to start, I think.
Okay. All right. And what I've heard about her, one of the few things that I've heard, and this is from her naysayers, her detractors, but also some of the people who really like her and will admit that this is the case about her writing, is that it's slow, that it's plodding. Mm-hmm. Now, it sounds like there's a strong coming of age element. There's some time gaps. You get to follow this character. I love that. I've long said that my favorite novelist of all time is Charles Dickens. That hasn't changed. I fell in love with Dickens's work when I was like 20, and I just absolutely love his writing, which some of my colleagues think that makes me saccharine and just like just kind of immature in terms of my literary taste. I have a friend who's like, no, it's Philip Roth, and it's Thomas Pynchon, and it's Samuel Beckett. Dickens is a child. And it's like, I'm sorry, Dickens was a genius, and I love Charles Dickens. But it sounds like, is that true? Would you say that there's a slow? I don't mind a slow pace.
No, Hobb is slow. Hobb admits she's slow. She even says, because she's written, Robin Hobb's a pseudonym, but she actually is written under 2 different pseudonyms. Her other pseudonym is Megan Lindholm. And when she does shorter fiction and shorter stories, and she writes as Lindholm, and when it's longer and epic and slower, she even says, she says Robin Hobb sometimes takes a while to get to the point. So she even admits that. But it's funny because there's a passage in the third trilogy, the first book of the third trilogy, that's about 150 pages of 2 characters talking. And you talk to just about every Realm of the Elderlings fan, and pretty much everybody cites that as one of their favorite passages in the entire trilogy. And all it is 2 characters kind of catching up. And I can't even do it justice as far as how well written it is. She's definitely fantastic.
And I don't mind
steroids. Love it.
I don't mind authors that take a while getting where they're going. I don't mind attention to detail. I'll hear people say, Tolkien is describing trees. And, one of the most common criticisms I hear, and as you know, Josh, from watching that video, I'm teaching a fantasy and sci-fi literature course for my students. This will be my 3rd year teaching it, and I'll be doing that this fall. And I have them read The Hobbit over the summer, and I have them they read Fellowship of the Ring. And so, and I'll have people say, Usually not my students, actually, because they get wrapped up in the wonder that Tolkien evokes. But I hear my colleagues and some of my friends say, I can't bear to read that laborious, slow introduction concerning hobbits. We have to get a tour of the Shire, and we're learning about pipeweed and hobbit genealogy. And this is not. There's no plot here. This is just intellectual masturbation, or exploring world building for world building's sake, or something like that. And I want to say that is maybe my favorite part of the whole book in Fellowship of the Ring. I love it. I love that. Of course, I like the hero's journey and everything else as well. But I like that kind of thing, and so it almost makes me feel like I would. As someone who, as you've probably realized, Josh, is slow in getting to the point, I very much enjoy this kind of thing, and it makes me feel like, with everyone who recommends Hobb to me, that I think I would really. Bald Booktuber always tells me to read Robin Hobb, and so
Scott's right. Yeah, Scott's right. She's amazing, but yeah, it's one of those. I ranted on one of my older videos when I first started, when someone complained about her being too slow, and I said the world's in too much of a damn hurry.
I know.
Just slow down and enjoy someone that is just going to transport you into another world, and it's such a great experience reading her. So yeah, start, and you can spread her out for sure. I mean, there's the different sub series, but you can definitely do that. Yeah, Andrew in the chat, he only likes the first 3 series. He doesn't like all 5, but he's allowed to be wrong.
He's allowed to be wrong.
We've talked about that before, because the third sub series does have a really beautiful ending. Yeah.
Well, tell me this. I've long said, I was on Christopher Rocchio's channel, and the subject of his roundtable was what makes for great fantasy. And one of the things that I said to him is, what I want to see is a world worth saving. And at the time when we had this conversation, I was reading what is it? James Islington's. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Licanius trilogy.
Yeah.
And I was explaining to these guys, it was Dave Butler and it was Christopher Rocchio, and I was explaining to them that I was having a lot of fun with the books, but I was lacking, I guess, this sense of why it all mattered. It was a rollicking sort of fun fantasy ride. Had echoes of Robert Jordan and stuff like that, but what I want to see in fantasy is a world worth saving. And one of the reasons I like Tolkien is he tells you why it matters that Frodo succeeds, and that the hunting group of companions that meet up there at Rivendell, why it matters that they throw the ring in the volcano, right? We get a sense of why the Shire is good, and why Rivendell is good, and why and what Middle Earth is, and why it matters that we save this world. And I want to get a sense of building up what the stakes are, why it matters. And I feel like someone like Tolkien gives you. Do we get kind of that thematic exploration in Robin Hobb?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, she's very thematically dense, and as I say, great character writer as well. But yeah, no, you'll love Hobb if you. I think even non-fantasy readers would love Hobb just because she's just a great writer. And I think you, especially with your background in English and being very well read across a lot of genres, I think you'll probably even appreciate her perhaps a bit more than maybe some other readers that maybe not as widely read as you are.
Speaking of people that keep getting recommended to me, especially by folks like Joanna, it looks like Janie Wirtz is here with us. That is an author, Janie Wirtz, that is also often recommended to me. So thanks for joining us. I appreciate that, and I am really interested. That's kind of on my distant TBR, and maybe I bump that up.
A good way to work her into your TBR right away is she has a really good short fiction collection called That Way Lies Camelot that I read over a couple months at the end of the year, and it was really great. So might be a way to work her in. TBR a little easier. I actually read a lot of short fiction as well. I tend to have a short fiction collection going on at all times, where between books I'll read a short story or two between like main novels and everything, and that helps break things up as well.
Then let me ask you then, based on that, what do you make then of the, what would you call it? How to tread carefully here, of the death of short stories? No, that's melodramatic, not the death. What would you make of? There's a sense in which the idea of writing a short story and having that be an important work that you've written, and then publishing that in, whatever it is, Amazing Stories or Weird Tales or Astounding Magazine. There's a sense that that's not the model anymore. What do you make of that? You're a fan of short fiction. I am as well. As an English teacher, you can't not be. So do you
yeah,
see
I think there's definitely less outlets now than there used to be. But you do see kind of indie press doing things. Like Grim Oak Press always puts out a bunch of things of short fiction, where I think Speakman gets a lot of authors to contribute things.
Sean Speakman?
Yeah. I think some well-established authors are able to publish their, short story collections. I'm thinking like Ken Liu, his short fiction collection is another one that's pretty remarkable. So I think there's still an outlet for it. It's just not as prevalent, and you don't have unfortunately, those periodicals. I know even like when I was growing up, I had the subscription to it was the Fantasy and Science Fiction Book Club, and it had these little kind of digest things that we'd get every month, and it would be like 10 different short stories. And I love those. I wish I still had those. I think at some point when my parents moved, they got rid of those, unfortunately. But I think they're I would guess that authors are still writing them, but since the market isn't there, it's probably a lot harder for those things to get out there. But I know that like the science fiction writers, that periodical still, I think, comes out. I forget the name of it right now. But it's a shame because, short fiction is so enjoyable.
You talking about Analog or Asimov's?
No, they have like the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, those volumes.
Yes.
I think those still come out. Yeah,
yes,
I think
they do.
Are being published. So
I almost feel like, you tell me if this is wrong. It could be wrong, but I get the sense that there are ways in which, in certain pockets or corners of the market, that short fiction can do well if it's anthologized. So yeah, when Stephen King puts out a book of short stories, people gobble it up. When other authors, I just bought a short story collection by Jeffrey Eugenides, you do see when you have a high profile author and they come out with, I think, what was it, N.K. Jemisin?
Oh, did she have one out? Yeah.
Did she have one out? I think so. It seems to be the case that when you do get a high profile author, and even especially when they're writing within a world that people care about. I know that Fonda Lee put out short stories from within her, Greenbone saga, things like that.
Rockio has some good ones too.
Rockio has some good ones. Every once in a while, John Grisham will come out. We were talking about legal thrillers earlier, and he'll do short stories from Ford County or something like that. And that sort of thing. Let me switch gears a little bit and ask you, what kind of fantasy literature is your jam? I know there are so many subgenres, and I always, again, gawk at your giant bookshelf and see everything from Brandon Sanderson, thank you very much, to Stephen Erickson, to David Eddings, to Robert E. Howard. Do you have a favorite subgenre of fantasy? When we talk about grimdark and high fantasy and sorcery and classic fantasy and science fantasy, I minored in Asian studies. I happen to very much enjoy Asian inspired fantasy, which is why you really sold me on Under Heaven, which I have a nice hardcover of that, thanks to you, hurting my wallet, Josh.
Love it
now and all of that. So I'm going to imagine that you'll say that you love all the genres equally, but That can't be true, Josh. What do you like the most?
I wouldn't say all. I would say, well, I think just like the way I read across genres, I think reading across fantasy genres is also something that I love. For instance, I just finished last night a book by David Gemmell, which is short, heroic fantasy. Love it.
Are you talking about Legend or just something else?
It's in Draenei. It's actually the first Chronicles of Druss the Legend I finished last night. And I really love that. Well, the second book I have up next month is Midnight Tides. Erickson, big, dense, huge doorstop of a book. And both things I think definitely, spark my interest. As for my favorites, I mean, I think I lean more on the literary side as far as the things I like. Guy Gabriel Kay right now is like eternally on my brain because I just finished his works and just fell in love with his works. His narrative voice is just so strong, and just love his works. Hobb, obviously, but I think I lean towards that side, but that doesn't mean that I can't just pick up a standalone, fast-paced, like, a Sanderson secret novel, and enjoy it. Like I read Yumi earlier this year, loved it. So I do think that I probably, I think I skirted the question, but I think jumping around, I think for me is something that I enjoy. I do like traditional fantasy, and I do love modern fantasy too. So yeah, I just totally evaded that question.
Oh, well, that is your prerogative, and I am fine with that. As long as you give me something I can chew on. I'm Christopher, not Christopher Rocchio, Dave Butler makes fun of me for this. I'm a huge fan of George R. R. Martin, and as the years go by and he continues to not publish the next book, I get made fun of more and more for Martin being, I call him my favorite modern fantasy writer, and that sort of thing. Are you a big Martin fan?
Yes/no. I mean, I haven't read anything by him in 12 years. Well, no, I take that back. I did read Fire and Blood, Fire and Blood is like so much better than it should be. I mean, it just shows how good he is as a writer, that he can turn basically an historical text and turn it into like a riveting book. So except for that, I haven't read much Martin, but I'm holding out hope that Winds of Winter will come out someday and I can reread the rest of A Song of Ice and Fire. Because I mentioned earlier that, that was one of the only works when I took that big break from fantasy. That was one of the only new works I read. So I would like to read it now that I have caught up and read a lot more in the genre over the past, 6 or 8 years. And I suspect my esteem for it will raise. But I told myself I'm not going to reread it until Winds of Winter has a release date. So I don't know if I'm delusional or what, but I'm going to try to hold out because there's so many other things I still have to read. So I can hold out.
I hear you. I think he is so great at writing characters. His world feels, in my opinion, other people can feel free to. I totally don't mind disagreement. It feels as real as I think it's possible for a fantasy world to feel when I'm reading Brandon Sanderson. And I totally respect the guy and like the guy and think he's salt of the earth. I've never been able to get into Brandon Sanderson. I did read Way of Kings, and I got about halfway through Mistborn. And in some sense, it's just not, when something's not for you. Yeah. I always feel like when I read Brandon Sanderson, always feel like I'm in a Disney movie or something. I'm in Mulan, a Brandon Sanderson character, she'll walk into a bar with a bunch of gigantic, muscled, hardened, tattooed, scarred up, criminal monsters. And, she'll play them at a game of cards. And they'll suddenly be like, whoa, it feels very Mulan to me. There's a melodramatic quality to it. Today is the live stream of the hot takes. Don't get mad at me, guys. I like all the other stuff you like. I like Martin because he does politics really well. He's a
Yeah.
student of Machiavelli and the Wars of the Roses. His world, for me, his world is really easy to get lost in because it feels so real. Because, for example, he's not afraid to kill his characters. And when someone walks into a bar in a George R. R. Martin novel in a seedy sort of urban a district in a rough part of town, it feels like what it feels like when I've walked into bars but it's in a fantasy world, and so I actually can suspend my disbelief and escape into that world.
Yeah.
But let me ask you then: do you? We're talking about genres. Do you read a lot of science fiction, Josh? I get the sense that that's not your main jam, but that you do read some.
Yeah, I've been in and out. I think like anything, it goes up and down. Sometimes like science fiction's like my second favorite. Right now, it's probably like my maybe fourth favorite genre. But I mean, I do have some favorites. I love the Hyperion Cantos. That series is my favorite. Of course, I love the first 4 Dune novels. After that, I tell people to stop. But yeah, I mean, I read here and there. I've read some Asimov, and I like The Foundation quite a bit. I like those books. So I don't feel as knowledgeable at science fiction because I feel like I've only scratched the surface. But I have discovered some great ones even since I've been on BookTube. Like Forever War, Joe Haldeman was amazing. Replay, Ken Grimwood was another one, which actually I found out about that one because George R. R. Martin recommended it. But yeah, I don't feel as well read. I'm starting Blind Sight by Peter Watts tomorrow, so that's supposed to be a great first.
I just started that, as I told you.
Yeah.
I just started that too, and I'm reading it not because I'm in any kind of reading club or anything like that, but I'm trying to make one of my favorite sci-fi genres is the first contact sci-fi genre. So I'm reading that because I want to make a video ranking. I love doing that. I love giving myself a purpose to read. And so I've done a deep dive, into all of these different first contact books. Contact by Carl Sagan, things like that. I read Project Hail Mary. I read A Mote in God's Eye. I read a few other ones, and my next one is Blind Sight, and then I have The Sparrow by Maria Doria Russell.
Oh, yeah, I have that on the shelf. I haven't read that yet.
Okay, so very good. Maybe at some point we'll read along with that. I have to read. What else do I have to read to make sure that I cover all my bases? I've got to read Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. There is. What else? There's a few other ones. Maybe people in the comments could share their favorite. There's a couple. Forge of God by Greg Bear. I'm going to really try to dive deep. I have one by Connie Willis that I want to do as well. So there are a bunch, and I want to rank them. And it makes it feel like I have a reason to read. You like First Contact as well. What's your favorite area of science fiction?
I think probably right now it's probably the space opera types.
Space opera,
probably, yeah. Because
me too. That's probably my favorite.
Maybe because that's most tangential to fantasy, and it feels kind of like that. But oh yeah, Mitch, that's that's like one of the best things ever. Scholar's Tale.
What is that?
In Hyperion.
Okay. The Scholar's Tale from Hyperion. I love the Scholar's Tale. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would probably be just kind of the space operas are probably my favorite, but I still have a long way to go with sci-fi. One thing I have discovered is I don't like too hard of a science fiction. Interesting. Like that's actually one of the reasons why Sanderson and I are kind of lukewarm is
the hard magic.
I don't need to know, how the magic works. I'm a big soft magic fan. Sometimes it can raise the stakes. Like actually I thought Sanderson did a great job in Mistborn. How that raised the stakes, and then he in the second Mistborn series he raise it even more, and it didn't work as much. It was just like, yeah, it's kind of like I always talk about like how cool the Force was until we heard anything about midi-chlorians.
Midi-chlorians,
like
yeah.
right there, why we don't need to have a hard magic system. So, but I digress. For me with science fiction, I don't like the heavy science ones so much, just because that's not a expertise, and I don't really care how all that works. So I think ones that are more on the spectrum of kind of not the hard science fiction are more the kinds of things that I like. I still like, you know, the bigger ideas that people come up with, but I guess not too sciencey.
Gotcha. So then we're gonna, for you, I do have a recommendation for you, getting to know you a little bit for the last hour and getting a sense of what you like. The fact that you very much love Hyperion. And so I will stay away from the Greg Egans of the world. We'll stay away from the Alistair Reynoldses of the world. That said, you also like chonky books, I have found, and you like space opera, you've said. I know that you like both people like, Dan Simmons, but also it seems like you also enjoy Christopher Rocchio's books.
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend somewhere in between a guy like Christopher Rocchio, which is, it's not soft science fiction, it's space opera, it's science fantasy. But it's also not Alistair Reynolds or, Greg Egan or anything like this. Have you read Peter F. Hamilton?
I've not, no.
I would recommend Peter F. Hamilton to you.
Is that what's the... I know that name. Yeah, I know that name.
He writes these massive space opera novels. I would recommend starting with Pandora's Star.
Okay.
Yes, it's a big, chonky book. Like Reynolds, it's big, it's far-flung. Often his books are set between 600 and 10,000 or even more years in the future. There's, people have changed. There's AI. There's uploading your consciousness. There's, they've found a way to travel close to the speed of light or something to that degree. In Pandora's Star, there's a network of wormholes and things like that. But he is he's someone who also verges into fantasy quite often. And he's a great writer, really, really entertaining. I think one of the reasons you'll like him is that he also he leans into the noir, the hard-boiled stuff, and many of his characters are detectives. So there's going to be the sci-fi element. There's going to be the fantasy element. There's a little bit of a fantasy element usually, but there's also a detective trying to solve a murder case on some far-flung planet in some, cyberpunk setting or something like that. So I'm going to recommend Josh to you. No pressure, but I think you, getting to know you, would like Peter F. Hamilton. That would be my suggestion. Maybe by the time we're done with this, you'll recommend a book to me, any genre that you think that I would like. Josh, just a couple more questions. You also like horror a lot, and you're a huge Stephen King fan. I'll very briefly share my experience with Stephen King. I've read. I like the idea of Stephen King. I promise this is not going to be another hot take. I'm not going to upset anyone on this because I like his work, and I want to like him, and I do like some of it. So, for example, with It, I was blown away by the first half of It, and I was in love with it. And then the second half happened, and I fell out of love with it. So I'm like, okay, clearly this Stephen King guy is amazingly talented. And I ended up giving it, what was it? I gave it, I think 7.8, 7.9 out of 10. Not bad. It was the second half I didn't like. And maybe it's a cliche, maybe that it's not true. Maybe it's a platitude that King, is a great writer, but then the latter third of every one of his books, whether it's Under the Dome or It, or any number of other King stories. The Stand. I did read The Stand. I read Under the Dome. To me, I haven't liked any of his endings yet. My wife loved what's the vampire one? Salem's Lot. She loved that. She read another one of Stephen King. She loved that. I literally teach on writing to my AP students. They have to read that over the summer.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan. And so many of his. I'm friends with many people who love Stephen King. Why am I wrong about the way that he ends his books? And where should I go next if I want to dispel my notions about Stephen King?
Okay, so first of all, you're not wrong. I mean, it's pretty common that a lot of criticisms of King is that he's always writing in search of an ending because he's the gardener and the architect. He's the gardener.
Right, he's the gardener.
Right. He doesn't always know where he's going at the end. Coincidentally, that's why I think his last 5 years dabbling in crime fiction has been a bad idea because those authors are plotters, and that's not
right.
him.
That's right.
No, I think the way to go with King, read my favorite one, which is 11/22/63. It's his finest ending. It's beautiful. It's time travel story. It's basically a man finds a time portal and he goes back in time to stop the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And, but he goes back to like 1958. So he has like 5 years in addition to like figuring out whether Oswald acts alone or if the mafia is involved or CIA or whatever. He has to form a life for himself. So a lot of it showcases that the skill that King has, slice of life. And, it's easily his most beautiful ending. It's an incredible ending. So I would say that's a home run. That's my favorite of his. And I would say Salem's Lot is a great horror novel, and it does have a great ending. That's probably less of a chunky commitment, but you read fantasy, so chunky books don't scare you. So yeah, I would say 11/22/63 for sure.
Sorry about that.
It's your audio cut.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, that's a good suggestion. I did watch your Stephen King ranking list. I've watched Mike's a bunch of times, and Mike loves what is it? It's 11/22/63.
Yeah.
So, what about other horror outside of Stephen King? The horror genre is actually quite frankly new to me. I know old school horror, H.P. Lovecraft, Ambrose Bierce, some of the classic sort of horror writers. What else are there? Other good modern horror writers?
You read Dan Simmons. Did you read The Terror?
No, I didn't. But
that's a good one. That's a good one. That's like a combination of historical fiction and horror. And it's one of those great genre benders, and it's a chunky one, but it's really good as well. It's basically the Franklin expedition that disappeared in the ice, trying to find the Northwest Passage. He adds a supernatural element to it that's fascinating. I read the book. And I was like,
cool.
Man, I wish Dan Simmons would do this for like a bunch of historical mysteries. Like, tell me how Roanoke ended.
That's awesome. So is there like, you don't want to spoil it. There's probably a creature or some supernatural element.
Yeah.
That gets the explorers in trouble or something like that. Okay.
Yeah, it's a really good read. It's I think Durfee on his channel, when he counted down his favorite Dan Simmons books, that was his favorite. Hyperion's mine of his, but I like The Terror a lot.
Okay. Now, who is McCammon?
Oh, Robert McCammon. Yeah.
Is that horror?
I haven't read much of him. I've heard that I've read his two big ones, I think, Swan Song and Boy's Life. And he does have a feel very similar to King. Swan Song is post-apocalyptic, and it's outstanding. Boy's Life is kind of magical realism, coming of age type of story. They're both extremely good. I want to read his. He has a series, Matthew Corbett series that I'm going to read from him. Yeah, he's one I haven't read enough of, because he's both of his books the year as I read them were like finalists for my book of the year. So I definitely need to read more McCammon too.
And I hear he's coming up. Mike always says he does coming of age very well.
Yeah, he really did in Boy's Life in particular.
All right. So what are you reading right now, Josh? What are you
So I'll be
now?
starting Blind Sight tomorrow, because I just finished actually I just finished a novella this afternoon by John Steinbeck called The Moon is Down. Yeah. It was a anti-Nazi propaganda, and it was very good. It was just like a 2-hour read. But yeah, I'll be starting Blind Sight by Peter Watts tomorrow. We're doing that. Fireside as a read along, so we'll be, chatting about that, and then I'm going to read Midnight Tides by Stephen Erickson after that.
All right, so I'll ask you about Stephen Erickson, and then I'm going to force you to give me a recommendation, and then we'll wrap it up there, Josh. Tell me, I bring this up with many of the booktubers who run in our circles. I've asked this to Jimmy. I have asked this to Philip and Joanna. Stephen Erickson, as someone who I have read many dense books, I did major in English and philosophy. I like a challenge. I like a difficult book. I've read Malcolm Lowry, and I've read these more difficult sort of postmodern, modernist authors, James Joyce. I'm just going to be honest. I read Gardens of the Moon and struggled greatly and decided to stop. And I was getting advice from people in the Booktube world and friends and people on Discord saying, you don't have to understand it. What you have to do is just, turn the Audible on, put Stephen Erickson on, you just put him on speed 2 and just enjoy the ride, man. And I'm not wired that way. I have to understand what I'm reading. I'm an intellectual purist. I want to know what's happening. I'm not going to turn to the next page unless I understand what happened on the previous page. And I never knew what was going on ever. And again, my threshold is really high for these kinds of books.
Yeah.
And I just said, my God, I can't do this.
So, well, let me tell you my experience with Malazan. I started with a read along. There were 4 of us, 4 different channels, and we were going to read Malazan one every other month. And like every other Malazan read along I think that's ever happened on Booktube, it imploded. I DNF'd in the middle of book 3. One of the other ones DNF'd at the end of book 3, and then the other 2 just said, we can't keep up this pace. I've been reading. So I DNF'd book 3, and then I think it was 15 months later, I came back and tried again. Loved it. And I read the 4th one last year, but I took an 8-month break between books 4 and 5. If anyone tells you it's not a challenge, they're lying to you. It is a challenge. I will say, though, that Gardens of the Moon is easily the most challenging of the first 5, because it is everything is so new. It's the in media res. He just throws you in, and you're just trying to flounder and figure out what's going on. And, most of us don't realize what's going on in that book. But I found that my experience now, 4 books in, I'm really enjoying the series, but I still have to spread it out because it does take a lot of mental focus. I was talking with Joanna. She did a video about reading speed recently, and I'm a fast reader, and I read probably 50, 60 pages an hour is probably about what I read. Mm-hmm. If it's like a Sanderson or someone like that, it might be 80 pages an hour. With Erickson, it's 30 pages an hour, because I have to read slower. I have to often circle back a page or 2 just to understand what's going on. But the best advice I got from anybody was from Philip. He just said, realize you're not going to understand everything, but just try to understand the big things. and just roll with it. And that was the best advice, because I tried the first time I read Memories of Ice, I was taking notes and I was writing down every POV. And when the chapter was done, I was writing how it finished, and then I would go back to it. And frankly, it felt like work. And that's not why I read. I read to enjoy. So I said, well, if I ever read this again, I'm just going to read it. And I did, and I loved it. I loved Memories of Ice. I read House of Chains. I loved it even more. And I think by the time I got to House of Chains, I think I had understood how to read Erikson better. So I would say, don't read it because any of us tell you you have to read it or you think you should read it. But if it does call to you, I think Dead House Gates is perhaps the strongest of the first 4 that I've read. It's a new beginning as well. It's on a different continent. So if you struggled with Gardens of the Moon, you may enjoy Dead House Gates for sure.
Yeah, there's a part of me that says that's very well adjusted, enlightened advice. And then there's a part of me that says, and Philip told me the same thing, just enjoy it. You're not going to get everything. Just enjoy the ride. There's a part of me that resents that. Maybe it's a bad part of me. And again, I've said this to Philip. It's probably me, not Steven Erikson or the people who love Steven Erikson. But there's a part of me that says I should, I should be able to understand what's going on as I move to the next page. And even when I'm reading a difficult book, these modernist experiments in prose and diction and syntax, usually I can get through it and understand what's going on. And unlike you, I was reading Erikson at like 15 pages an hour. And maybe it's partly my Western mind. I'm a very linear thinker, logical, linear thinker, step by step, premise, deductive reasoning, that sort of thing. And I was finding myself resenting Erikson as I was reading it. And the idea, and I would hear people say, well, you got to read it the first time and not know what's going on. Then you need to go to the wiki site. Then you need to get involved in discords. Then you need to read a tutorial about it. Then you need to understand that it's basically like a history book. And when you're done with that, you need to work on yourself a little bit and read it a second time. The second time you read it, you will actually really enjoy it. Then your life will change. And I'm like, am I in a cult or something? I'm not going to do any of that. Actually.
Yeah, I don't love there is a subset of the Malazan fandom that says that, you'll get it all the second time. I don't have time to plan a second time, But I would say that the one thing that I do is Philip and AP have 2 discussions on each book, like a spoiler filled and then a spoiler free and a spoiler filled. I always watch those after I read it just to see what I missed, because they often bring up things that I didn't get. Janny's comment here, slowing down, especially in something this dense, is certainly great advice. But if you feel yourself calling to you, but I mean, like even AP says, you don't have to read Malazan to call yourself a fantasy fan. So I wouldn't get any FOMO. I mean, I'm taking forever to read this series. This is like year 3.5 and I'm on book 5 next week. So
well, if anyone can break it down and explain it to me and make me like it, it's Philip and AP. AP is actually the editor of the fantasy novel that I am writing with my wife and that we're going to be attempting to publish in August.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a long journey. We've been writing it for several years, world building, just having fun with it, spending time together. And it's just kind of been a hobby and an activity we do together. And we eventually submitted it. We don't know anything about agents or publishing. We submitted it to Matt Bialer, who is the publisher of, like Pat Rothfuss. And we just said, who do we send this to? And we'll do the thing that everyone's supposed to do. And what's like our book and how do you, so we submitted it to him and he actually requested a full.
Hey, that's good.
And then he read it and he got back to us and he said, it's good, not great. And he said, it's good enough that you can resubmit it to me. But what you need, essentially what you need, there's a lot of really good stuff in here, but what you need is a developmental editor.
Yeah.
And so I said, oh, shoot, like Matt Bialer is like not going to be wrong. And every comment that he read the whole thing and sent me 2 emails with like tons of comments. And I said, he's not wrong. Like everything he said is correct. We suck at this. We didn't know what we were doing. We need to start over. And so we hired AP actually.
Yeah.
And he's so amazing at what he does.
Yeah.
He's the sharpest, most critical dragon, of course. He's
right.
He read so meticulously. I just would say this to anyone who's watching this now or in the future who wants a good editor. What AP does is he goes through every sentence of your book and he makes dozens of comments every chapter. And then when he's done, and he does a preliminary, he asks you to send him a few chapters. Then you do a meeting with him where he breaks down your chapters live in front of you. And then he impresses you. And so you hire him, of course, because he's so talented. Yeah. And then when you hire him, and his rates are reasonable, reasonable market rates. And he goes through every chapter. And then when he's done, he does like a 20, 30 page, like 30 or 40 page breakdown of everything, every aspect of your book, the story, the characters, this storyline, that storyline, where it falls apart here, but where it's good here. And it's so thorough. And then he'll meet with you afterwards when you hire him too. And he's just, he's great at what he does. And so he did the edit on ours. And we're spending this whole summer just addressing everything that he's asked us to address. Yeah. And we're kind of rewriting, re-outlining. We already did that. We're about a third of the way through the book, getting it where it has to be done by August to resubmit it to the people we want to resubmit it to. So no clue. Maybe it's going to suck at the end of this. I have no idea, but I'm
sure it'll be better. I mean,
I hope so. I hope so. It better be. So I guess I would just say, if any of you are doing I know, Josh, at one point you were trying to write. Weren't you trying to write?
Not really. I had a memoir going at one point, but
okay.
Yeah. Definitely not a skill set of mine.
Okay. Let me end with this, Josh. I want to keep this a nice, concise discussion here. I've really enjoyed having you on. Let me ask you, we got to know each other over the last hour and a half. What would you recommend to me? What should I be reading? And I'll tell you, like I said to Mike before, and I did it, whatever you suggest, I'll read it. You got to give me a couple months, but whatever you suggest, anything, I'll read it. I can't promise you I will read the Stephen Erickson, given the trouble I've had with it. So if you would pick something else besides Stephen Erickson, please.
I mean, can I pick the one that's on your shelf, Under Heaven by Guy Gavriel Kay?
Oh, yeah, you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, because hearing you talk, you like the literary side of fantasy. Yep. You like Asian-inspired fantasy.
Yeah.
I mean, and he's the author I talk about the most right now. So I just filmed a video. It'll be out on my channel in the next 2 weeks, where I did had a video with a collaboration with Bridger from the Library Ladder and Jake Bishop, where we talk about all the books and we kind of tier rank and rank all of Kay's books. So I'll just, spoiler alert, Under Heaven is one of his S tier books. So that would be my recommendation to you.
I think you've gotten it into the zeitgeist. So there's your influence, Josh.
We're trying.
You're doing that. Bridger and Jake and my buddy Samwise apparently has some Under Heaven read going on. I think they're going to make a video.
I'm talking to him on Saturday. He's going to be on the channel. So
oh, great.
Yeah.
Oh, he's fantastic. He's actually one of my beta readers. And he read the early bad version that Matt Bialer told us that we needed to rewrite. So I'm just grateful that he's so patient and wise for his years. No, I will read Under Heaven. I bought the book because you talked so passionately about it. And, Jake Bishop, who is the youngest person whose advice I take deeply seriously. No, Samwise is pretty young too. Jake, just is he loves Guy Gavriel Kay, and
I think Jake and I are spirit animals when it comes to fantasy, because both of us have Kay and Hobb as our top tier, and it seems like, you know, and I read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, and we had the same kind of reception of that, the things we loved, the things we didn't like as much. So yeah, we seem to have tastes that really align, at least in that genre.
Yeah, I Samwise and Christopher Rocchio might be we each have our literary spirit animals, might be mine. And so I'm going to read Under Heaven. You got me so excited about it that I dipped into it and read a little bit of the first chapter. And
it's got one of the best beginnings of his books.
Oh, with the ghosts. I'm like, okay,
yes.
I can barely stand it. I can barely wait. But okay, thank you for that recommendation. That's already on the TBR, so it's kind of cheating, but
I know it's cheating, but it's K, so that's I'm trying to spread the gospel.
I will read it. Josh, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I hope we cross paths again soon. And it's been a joy watching your videos. And again, I appreciate it. And we'll talk soon. All right. See you, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.